Welcome back to Hardball. President Bush and John McCain were the obvious losers of this election, but who were the other big political losers of this campaign season? We're ranking the top 5 right now with Jonathan Allen of CQ, that's CongressionalQuarterlyPolitics.com, and the New Republic's Michael Crowley. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. I'm going to start at, where do you start at the bottom? Let's start with number 5, Sarah Palin. It just keeps giving this story, Jonathan, the fact that she didn't want to be prepared for the Katie Couric interview, and obviously it showed.
Yeah, you know, Chris, the problem for Sarah Palin with some of these stories coming out now isn't whether she knows which countries are in North America or if she knows the difference between a country and a continent with Africa. It's that we believe them or that they are believable. You know, she showed herself to not really have down all the things you would expect in a vice presidential candidate or certainly a president, and that has put her in a bad position. That said, at the beginning of this campaign, she was known to Ted Stevens, 600,000 Alaskans, some frightened caribou, and now she's recognizable anywhere in America.
You know, there's such a unfair distribution of knowledge in this country. You've heard the phrase best informed nobody, Michael. You can also have the least informed somebody. And it seems like there's 330 or 40 out of 350 million people that know that Africa is a continent, and they're not running for vice president, but there's somebody who ran who didn't know that Africa is a continent and that South Africa is a country and that North America includes Mexico, Canada, and the United States, and we know these things, and it is of no value because we still can't win the nomination for vice president. But somebody who doesn't know the most basic facts of world knowledge is up there looking like a candidate for vice president, speaking rather well as if they do know these things.
Well, I mean, I guess you can give anybody a bunch of talking points. And remember, she actually, trained in journalism, so she knows how to basically read a few points on TV. In a way, I would say, by the way, that, somebody who's a loser here is John McCain, whose reputation of all the things that happened in this campaign, nothing damaged McCain's reputation. And the fact that a guy who was so serious about my country, country first, my service to my country, was willing to entrust the country to this woman who, even if all these stories are not true, was clearly not prepared for that job. So in a way, Palin is the loser here, but McCain really ended up taking a shot for having chosen her, and I think deservedly so.
It's been pointed out that even to get a job at McDonald's, you'd have to have 3 interviews to get the job. Let's take a look at Joe Lieberman here right now. Joe Lieberman, I think this is more of a mixed bag depending on your point of view. If you're something of a hawk, you might say, good for you, Joe. He spoke at the Republican convention. He broke party ranks. He campaigned almost daily. We watched him on TV almost daily for his friend John McCain. Let me ask you, Jonathan, is he dishonored or simply in a bad place? I mean, I'm not sure it's an easy thing to do a nonpartisan or a non-judgmental judgment on this fella.
I think it's very difficult to do a nonpartisan judgment on him. I think that there are a lot of Democrats who are upset with him. I think that's more true of those outside of the Senate. And the Senate is a place where an individual senator has a lot of power and is sort of needed to build coalitions on any kind of issue. So even if he loses his chairmanship, they're going to have to come to him for votes, and that'll allow Joe Lieberman to continue to be a force in the Senate on any number of issues, including those defense issues on which he falls somewhere in the middle. He's not as conservative as some of the Republicans are, obviously a lot more conservative than a lot of the Democrats.
Michael Crowley, is Joe Lieberman a hero for being independent, or is he a bad guy for breaking ranks?
No, well, listen, I mean, I think he really did follow his beliefs, and Democrats think his beliefs are crazy and that he's totally lost his way. But there is actually some element of kind of bravery to it. I mean, his life has not been easy in the last couple of years. I think he really does feel strongly about these things. But, this is a year when basically you were seeing Republicans taking the risk of going over to the Democratic side, making the endorsement of Obama. Lieberman's the one guy who goes the other way and just had the rug completely pulled out from under him. I mean, it's got to be terribly awkward for him up in the Capitol now. So he's a loser in that regard, but there was, I think it was basically about principle for him, even if you vehemently disagree with it. So maybe you give him a little credit for that.
Well, John Dunn was it who said no man is an island, but he may well be one after this is all over. And I think there's something weirdly admirable about a guy who doesn't give a damn what anybody else thinks but himself. We'll think about that. Everybody's going to have an opinion on this one. Coming up at number 3, Senator Elizabeth Dole. She not only was defeated by Kay Hagan, but she also ran that vicious ad accusing Kay Hagan, who's now the senator from North Carolina, and her victor, of being an atheist, godless sort of person, even using a voice by an actor to make it sound like she had said there is no God, and clearly that was all, to be blunt, a lie. Jonathan.
Yeah, Elizabeth Dole proved herself to be a terrible manager of the National Republican Senatorial Committee a couple of years ago, and I think a lot of Republicans saw that she might have trouble winning her own re-election as a result of that. She didn't run a particularly effective campaign. She's originally from North Carolina, but did not spend a lot of time in the state and didn't do the things that you need to win. And at the end, she runs this ad that I think hurt her reputation with a lot of people. You know, the one act probably won't undo the many things that she's done over the course of her career, including being I think the secretary of 2 cabinet departments, but certainly Elizabeth Dole looks pretty bad at the end of the day in this.
Well, yeah, I think she's got to do something to fix something. Let's take a look at the Bradley effect. This isn't a person, this is an attitude. A lot of us worried that a lot of people, white voters, would go into that voting booth and vote differently than they told the pollsters they would. There's some evidence of that in the past, in the famous Tom Bradley races in California, of course, the Doug Wilder race in Virginia. There wasn't that effect in the Bradley effect in the Harold Ford Jr. race in Tennessee a couple years ago. What do you make of that, Michael? I'm not sure there's not people that do that, but bottom line, it didn't have the impact that thought might have had.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, this is a little bit of a mixed bag. As my first reaction is I want to say, you know, this seems like a really nice thing. On the other hand, you know, it does seem pretty clear from anecdotal evidence, a lot of reporting, and some of the polls you saw that people based their vote on race. They were just honest about it. So we've removed some of the dishonesty from the racial debate. I guess that's some kind of improvement. We don't have people lying anymore about their intentions. But the fact is, there were still people who I think allowed race to be the determining factor in their votes, and that's very discouraging. So it's maybe, you know, a step forward and a step back at the same time, or something like that.
And some of them avoided the issue by voting for Hillary Clinton in the primary, who are Democrats, and then voted for John McCain, all along never intending in any way to vote for Barack Obama because of ethnic reasons. We don't know this for sure, but it is in the numbers. Let's take a look now at Karl Rove, the biggest loser of the year. Karl Rove thought that he could build a Republican Party by dividing the country, by grabbing what he thought was the cultural right of this country and using it to build a majority of the country. That this would be a permanent Republican majority based upon division, by harsh choices that people had to choose between being patriotic or not, being for wars or not, being with the cultural values of the right or not. Jonathan, it looks like that's not the case. We don't have a country driven by cultural values and hawkish views of the right now.
You know, I've talked to a lot of Republicans in the last couple of days about what's been going wrong with the Republican Party and how they're going to dig themselves out. And what I keep hearing over and over again is the Republican Party has not concentrated enough on economic issues, on solving people's problems, on applying conservative principles to the basic modern issues that people are facing, and instead have spent so much time on these cultural issues that when Barack Obama went out and made an argument and put together a comprehensive economic plan, he had a plan, and that the Republicans didn't have a counter to that for solving people's problems, and that was a big problem for Republicans on Election Day this year, and maybe going forward if they can't figure out a way to right the ship.
Michael, in a way, the dramatic defeat of Rick Santorum in Pennsylvania 2 years ago must have been a early indicator, a leading indicator of this to come, that people just don't like that kind of politics.
Yeah, you know, it's Nixon land. It's that book. It's that culture war politics. It's not
beautifully written book, by the way. I love that book.
And you know, the country is changing. You're seeing a rise of a professional class that is much more liberal on social issues. They're more tolerant on race, on gay rights, on abortion. It's just a losing strategy. And more people are living in urban areas, not small towns. That's one reason why the Palin thing whipped up a small audience but didn't have broad appeal. Just a lot of Americans don't actually identify with that small town life. So, you know, Rove got his big realignment in the end. Unfortunately, it was in the wrong direction. So better luck next time.
He should have to spend the rest of his life watching graduation from college ceremonies, because every time there's a graduation, his crowd and their point of view loses big.
Yeah.
Graduation ceremonies, Karl, if you're watching, enjoy them. Jonathan Allen, thank you. Michael Crowley, thank you. Up next,